I invite plain old Mr. Martin Wolf to join us on the stage, please, and to be joined with David French, who is Executive Vice President of the National Retail Federation and Chief Lobbyist in Washington. Gentlemen, let me take a seat here. That was a democratic view. We want balance, so I'm going to start with David French, who served before working for the National Federation of Retailers as a Republican Senate staffer. Am I correct?
That's correct.
So I know you're not here as a Republican. You're here on behalf of the Federation, but any critique, comments, or observations about what the Congresswoman had to say?
Well, I represent the retail party at the National Retail Federation. My job is to make the world safe for retail. So I think Congresswoman Ross is very astute, and I thought she was very correct in many of what the things she said. Until last Tuesday, the Democrats did not really have a clue how to win election in the second Trump term. There were many competing theories, but they didn't know what was going to work. I think after Tuesday, they now have a clue what might work. The Mamdani election in New York is a little bit of a contrarian indication, however, and so they haven't resolved their internal disagreements about what direction they have to go forward. She's right. Turnout was stronger than most people expected in many districts, and she's right that it was a little bit of a wave. I'm not sure I would go so far as to celebrate it as a real wave. The Republican candidates in most of the top races were very, very weak. But the next 12 months are going to be very interesting as everybody tries to position for the 2026 midterm elections.
Okay, Martin Wolf.
Well, first of all, I have to stress very carefully, I'm neither a political commentator nor an American. And so everything I say is the view of an outside observer, though, of course, given that I lived in America for 10 years, very interesting years, 1971 to 1981, which included Watergate, though I wasn't working on America, but I was in Washington, D.C. Two of my children were born there. And of course, like anybody else working on the economy, America has probably entered my thoughts at least a third of the time, if not half of the time. And I think I know a reasonable amount about what's going on in the US economy. But I'm very, very clear that this is not an area of my expertise. So basically ignore everything I say. Now I will say something. I believe from 2016, in fact, I wrote my first column on Mr. Trump in March 2016. I still think it was the most important column I wrote. And the headline of this column was, Donald Trump is how great republics meet their end. So it seemed to me this is a character who is very clearly from the beginning intending to end democracy in America because he doesn't understand the idea and he finds it extremely detestable. It's obvious to him, it was obvious quite from the beginning, that as far as he's concerned, a properly run America will be run by him unchallenged and unquestioned. There wasn't any secret about that. One would have to be a complete idiot not to realize that. And I thought this was a point in American history at which that appeal would work. And both judgments, I think, have proved correct. And I also thought that the people who didn't want that to happen, which would include pretty well all the Republicans I knew a lot of Republicans who are, of course, without exception, no longer Republicans. That includes some very distinguished people. And the Democrats wouldn't know what to do about it because Trump and the people who support him are a very significant minority. They are a minority, and they're very determined and able. Mr. Trump is an incredibly talented demagogue. There's no question. but he's not an incredibly talented political operator. But over time, he has got some very talented political operators around him, of which I think the most important is the present head of OMB, who wrote Project 2025. So that's
Mr. Vaught,
Mr. Vaught. So I take the project of converting America into a dictatorship very, very seriously. Now, the question is, will it be stopped? And that, I think the next 3 or 4 years will tell us. The optimistic side is that, one, Mr. Trump's program is, I believe, economically incompetent and will do visible damage. It will clearly fail to deliver on one of his signature promises, which was to lower prices, not lower inflation, lower prices, which has most certainly not happened. And it is pushing the United States into a very mild version, in my view, of stagflation. I mean, it's very mild, but it's clearly not a boom. And since he was elected very clearly by a lot of people for the economy, that's not going to play well for him. And I think that's part of the story. I don't think Congresswoman Ross really stressed about seeing it very clearly part of the story. And I don't think it's going to get better. So I'll just finish. Second, some of the actions he's taking are very in people's faces, because he's got basically a paramilitary operation operating in American cities, along with the military.
You're referring to the squads of ICE who arrest people.
And I mean, I have friends who live in the major cities who have been occupied, it's the only word to use, and that's pretty in your face. It wouldn't be surprising if the elections move against him in the midterms, and we'll see about that. And he's not going to be a candidate in the next presidential election, and whoever replaces him will have a really big problem. So I tend to the view that if there are free and fair, reasonably free and fair elections, this will be an interlude, and they will probably go back to normal politics, but things won't go back to where it was before. And if there are not free and fair elections, which essentially means military intervention in crucial cities in the presidential election, then the outcome is completely unpredictable. And the next 4 years will probably be crucial in the history of America, and which means actually, as I argued in the book I published very recently, The Crisis of Democratic Capitalism, crucial for the future of democracy in the world, because without the US, the West doesn't exist.
Very clear from Martin Wolf. I said to many moderators when we were preparing for the Lugano Global Forum, some of the questions will come from just watching CNN the morning of the conference. So this morning at 6 a.m., I turned on CNN and I saw 2 news items, and I'm going to ask Mr. French about one of them, and I'm going to ask Mr. Wolf about the other. The item I saw was that Trump announced that tariffs on Switzerland will be reduced, and the private business delegation seems to have successfully now subcontracted the minor work to the Swiss president and the Federal Council to paper the deals they've made and obey the private sector deal. Mr. French, is that your reading on Switzerland? And was it right to take the gold bars to Mr. Trump and the Rolex watch? Was that important?
Before I answer the question, I feel I should respond to Martin's observation about the threat to democracy. One of the reasons why the Democrats have been in the wilderness in the last couple of years is they have spent the entire last 10 years arguing that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. And then he won a majority of the popular vote in 2024. So if your campaign model is he's threatening democracy and then he's democratically elected, you're sort of out of bullets at that point, and you've got to come up with a different strategy. So they're still working out that different strategy. Is it Napoleon who said the state is me? Is that my
Louis XIV.
Louis XIV.
Louis XIV? The state c'est moi.
L'État, c'est moi.
L'état, c'est moi. So Trump has that understanding of his role as president. Now, to answer your question, I think you're right. The business delegation to Washington appears to have been successful. It was probably overdue. Many people in the business community wanted a more robust engagement earlier. So it's a good thing that it happened, and I think they now are counting on the Swiss federal government to help work out the details. But as we've seen in other negotiations, until there's an agreement both sides are willing to announce, it's not final. In fact, the deal with Vietnam took months to announce because in between the agreement and the announcement, the president unilaterally changed the tariff rate on Vietnam. So we fingers crossed.
Okay, Martin Wolf, I want to get to tariffs again in a moment, but at 6 a.m. this morning, CNN reported that President Trump is suing your BBC for $1 billion because they had a documentary which reported that he had incited violence on January 6, 2021, and because of an editing mistake, he was upset. He's successfully got ABC, NBC, CBS, Paramount, CNN, and other American television channels to pay him millions of dollars to settle these lawsuits. How do you feel as a British citizen with an American president who gets your bosses at the BBC fired, Mr. Wolf?
Well, separate elements in this. Just as a matter of interest, in which court he's presumably taking him in an American court? It must be an American court. I think the chances of winning on that are small. The chance of getting $1 billion is zero. But it's fun for him. I think the New York Times has also been sued and has been very robust about it.
$15 billion for
the
New York
15
Times,
billion, and has told him to go jump in a lake. I think that's the best approach for us to take on this. But I think in this case, Donald Trump did not actually get the DG and one of the most senior officials in the BBC sacked. As far as I understand this story, and I have no real expertise, they really did this to themselves in the sense, or at least the BBC did, because they did some, well, if somebody in the FT had written a story which cobbled together two parts of a speech an hour apart into one sentence, they wouldn't survive. So I think it's a perfectly clear journalistic malfeasance. And he said and done so many outrageous things anyway, they really didn't need to do it. So I find it very, very sad that the BBC has done this, but I'm not going to go into the travails of the BBC, which is a whole other story.
Okay, I promise not to keep quoting CNN from 6 a.m. this morning, but there was also the report that Mr. Trump is seriously considering placing 107% tariffs on Italian pasta, Mr. French?
On Italian what?
Mr. French knows this. Spaghetti.
And fusilli and
fusilli. Fusilli.
Why is that?
What's going on there? Is that real?
This is actually, we've seen this year a lot of untraditional uses of tariffs. This is actually a traditional use of tariffs. This goes back to a 1996 anti-dumping investigation brought by American pasta manufacturers alleging that the Italian industry was dumping, several producers in the Italian industry were dumping pasta at less than fair market value into the US market. And as part of that investigation, the Commerce Department imposed something in the range of 20% tariffs on Italian exports to the United States of pasta, specific producers of pasta. As part of that investigation, the Commerce Department has allowed periodic reviews. We're now almost 30 years into this, and they have done a review, and their recommendation is a 91.74% tariff on Italian pasta, which combined with the EU baseline rate would come to 107%.
Is that real or just talk?
It is not final. It is a preliminary recommendation by a panel at the Commerce Department. It is real. But again, this is the way tariffs have normally been applied to remedy trade practices that countries feel outside the bounds of the WTO or other.
But Prime Minister Meloni says she's the best friend of Trump and everything will be fine for Italy. They just smiled together.
I'm sure they're very close, and I'm sure that there are furious negotiations going on behind the scenes. But it is, again, this is a traditional. There are dozens of anti-dumping investigations ongoing in the agencies of the U.S. government. This is not unusual, but the timing is a little unusual. Again, if he feels like he is losing tariffs at the Supreme Court, this is his instant. This is his cup of noodles equivalent of the global tariffs.
Spaghetti.
He just adds water, and he can inflate the tariffs to almost anything.
Aggiungere acqua e bollire. Sorry.
I want to make just a couple of comments. I suppose this is a joke view. My view is very simple. If it doesn't come from Italy, it isn't pasta. And though, of course, the Americans pretend they're substitutes, and therefore it can't be worth having protective tariffs because there's nothing legitimate to protect. No decent person should eat anything else.
That's probably true in New York City, but not in Kentucky.
I just wanted to comment on what David said because he made a very important point. And I both strongly agree and strongly disagree. I strongly agree. I don't know whether I disagree, but just a comment. I strongly agree that the elections will be decided as they are in most democratic elections, not on judicial or political philosophy, as it were. The truth is that in very, very few countries, I suspect Switzerland is a genuine exception, but somebody will correct me, do people actually care about democracy or anything? Yes, that's what I said. I think Switzerland is an exception, which is why I think it will be the last democratic country in the world, if we get there. And so I'm perfectly happy to believe that a great many most Americans will vote on something completely different. And most obviously the economy and other things, identity things of great importance to them. But it doesn't mean, in my view, that democracy is not in question. It's just you don't defend democracy, it turns out, by saying that the other guys are a threat to it. You defend democracy by being a really effective government. And that's what I think a great many left of center and center parties have forgotten. And if you can't govern a country properly, people will legitimately choose somebody else, however malevolent, in my view, they might be, and indeed, however incompetent they might be. And this, my final comment, I think we agree on this largely, the tariff policy of the United States, as currently transacted, has absolutely no legitimate intellectual basis whatsoever, and let's not pretend otherwise, because it doesn't.
Thank you. We have 5 more minutes. I want to take 2 or 3 somewhat technical financial market issues and ask each of you your opinion. Let's just talk about the dollar one more time. Yesterday, Martin Wolf presented a very interesting speech where he talked about the dollar's relatively smaller store in central banks, but that it remained around 60% of central bank reserves. Gold has overtaken dollars, I believe, in some central banks. That's just the price issue. Immediate response. Do Trump and Bessent, have they had implicitly or explicitly the desire, as it appears, to engage in what I guess, John Maynard Keynes called competitive devaluations. And do you think the dollar has more depreciation to come, Mr. Wolff, and then Mr. French?
I think Mr. Besant and Mr. Moran, Chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, pretty clearly do want a decline of the dollar as one of the elements in getting rid of the structural current account deficit of the United States, which has existed now for many, many decades. They think that's a way of forcing other countries, particularly China, but also Germany, to adjust their current account surpluses. One. Two, it's not at all clear to me that Donald Trump himself has that aim. I'm not sure that he quite gets the links between currencies, tariffs, external balances, fiscal policy. I don't think he's there. But Moran and Besant are not stupid. They do understand that. They also understand this is risky, and they're concerned that one of the consequences of this is that there will be dumping of dollar assets, because depreciation is depreciation, and people don't like having a very large part of their liquid wealth in a depreciating asset, particularly if the government concern is creating vastly more of it in different ways, debt and money, and is indicating a fair level of indifference about its price. So they have to manage this incredibly carefully. And I can't say, given that the principle is Donald Trump, that's very easy to do. And so that leads me to the third point. It is not unreasonable to conclude, nothing is ever certain in these things, that given the pressure on the central bank to lower rates, given the fact that inflation is extremely sticky at above target levels, for the Fed target levels, while the economy is, it is true weakening, that interest rates are going to fall. Not perhaps as far as they want.
Maybe not in December.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying tomorrow.
Next year.
The tendency will be for, they have a net stimulative fiscal policy, which will get much worse if, and David knows much more about this than I do, the Supreme Court makes it more difficult to levy tariff revenue, because it's revenue, it's a big part of it. So the fiscal position looks worse. And the United States is rapidly approaching the point at which it has the highest level of debt relative to GDP in its history. Given all this, as I argued yesterday, it would not be unreasonable to conclude that American inflation will rise and the general pressure on the dollar will be downwards. But that doesn't mean that the dollar will be replaced by other currencies. As I've argued, I think it's very, very difficult to do. But we are in a period which rather looks like the 70s. And in the 70s, the dollar was chronically weak. It was much worse than this is likely to be. And it seems to me very reasonable to expect that again. And that, to my mind, is what the gold price is showing us. People have, all the gold in the world has been mined long ago, but the price is going up because they're looking for the ultimate hedge. And I think the Bitcoin price is at least partly the same thing.
David French?
I think Martin's right. Donald Trump and the Treasury Secretary may not agree on the devaluation of the currency. I think very much like Donald Trump views himself as the embodiment of the federal government. He views the value of the currency as implicit, as an evaluation of his performance. And so I think he's instinctively reluctant to admit that devaluation would help some of the fiscal pressures facing the government. The interesting thing as a business person,
do you think Trump understands how currency markets work?
I'm going to decline to answer that question. As a business person, however, he knows how debt works because he was always heavily leveraged, and an inflationary environment helps him pay off his heavily leveraged portfolio. So expecting a consistent policy application from Donald Trump is very difficult.
He has been famously, I can't remember the number, 6-time bankrupt? I mean, I can't remember, but he's a multiple bankrupt.
6 times.
So, I might have got...
He has experience in bankruptcy.
So the view that the US might be tempted by a debt restructuring, bankrupt, which also Moran and Betts, and particularly Moran, have mentioned, would not be unreasonable for creditors to
The
fear.
President of the United States has, last year, said on television, maybe we just give them 40 cents on the dollar and we redo it.
Exactly. So
Treasury bonds.
it would not be unreasonable for people who hold colossal quantities of dollars to think this isn't the safest asset in the world.
Viva la franc. Thank you, David French. Thank you, Martin Wolf.
Thank you.